And those have been the visuals of the Prime Minister there arriving for the climate summit, which is to take place over the next few hours. It's a very crucial day ahead for the Prime Minister. It's a packed schedule that the leader has had over the last few hours and up ahead as well. In just about 2 hours from now, we will have the Indian Prime Minister also meeting US President Donald Trump as a part of the G7 summit. Now, the Indian Prime Minister's very presence at the G7 summit is an indication of India's growing significance at the global stage. Remember, India is not a part of the G7 grouping, but the Indian Prime Minister has been invited personally by the French President Emmanuel Macron to attend the G7 summit, and that is a very strong indication of India's growing significance on the international stage. Prime Minister Modi is holding several bilaterals on the sidelines of the G7 summit. The most talked about is the meeting with US President Donald Trump that is set to take place at 3:45 PM IST today. That meeting is expected to last about 45 minutes. That will be the second meeting between the two leaders this year. Remember, the bilaterals coming in the backdrop of India's move to abrogate Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir. Also in the backdrop of trade tensions with America. Trump has offered to mediate on the Kashmir issue thrice, but India has made it absolutely clear that it does not want any third-party involvement, maintaining that it is a bilateral issue. A short while ago, the Prime Minister also met the President of Senegal, Macky Sall. And among the sets of bilaterals that are lined up, the Prime Minister also meeting German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Remember, they last met on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Osaka in the month of June. And simultaneously, we have the spouses of the G7 world leaders sharing some light-hearted moments. They've been touring several parts adjoining the summit venue. Yesterday as well, we saw visuals of the spouses of the G7 member nations leaders, also the non-G7 member nations leaders, their spouses sharing some light-hearted moments led by the French First Lady Brigitte Macron. They had toured various villages in France, also known for their pepper. They tasted locally made sangria. Now we have these visuals coming in from right next to the summit venue of the spouses led by the First Lady of France, Brigitte Macron. It's been interesting to see the engagements that not just the world leaders of the G7 members have been having, but also the moments that their spouses have been sharing on the sidelines of the G7 summit. Remember, yesterday they met and toured across several villages in France. They tasted locally made sangria, also shopped. Those were interesting visuals as well. And now we have another engagement that they are sharing. Prime Minister Modi's last bilateral engagement. On that note, let's tell you more about what's lined up. That last bilateral engagement will be with the President of Chile. Sebastián Pinera is one of several non-G7 leaders invited to the summit. Yesterday, the Prime Minister met Boris Johnson for the first time since he took over as the Prime Minister of UK. Prime Minister Modi congratulated Johnson on the UK's victory in the third test at the Ashes tournament. That's how the conversation between the two leaders began. They went on to discuss several ways to strengthen ties between UK and India. And shortly after those discussions, Prime Minister Modi met with the Chief of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. The Prime Minister's office tweeted out saying that fruitful discussions were held on a wide range of issues. It's been a packed schedule for the Indian Prime Minister, and several more key engagements lined up over the next few hours. A bilateral with Angela Merkel scheduled for about 3 PM IST, followed by a bilateral with US President Donald Trump. That is scheduled for 3:45 PM IST. The Indian Prime Minister will then be departing from the summit venue at about 6:40 PM IST today. It's after a gap of more than 10 years that India has been invited to the G7 summit. The last time India was invited was way back in 2005 when Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister.